Directions. Determine each type of question: prediction, inference, detail, big picture, or connection. Shade the question the correct color. Answer each question using complete sentences. This is Masque of the Red Death Reimagined, or Shortish Story number 10. Elizabeth was lying on the sofa watching a movie when I finally got home. I wasn't surprised. We'd been roommates for a couple of years, so I knew how she liked to spend the evening. "Hey, Amber, how was rehearsal?" she asked. "Good," I said, hanging up my coat on the hook by the door. "I think the new play is going to really take off, if we can ever actually perform it for an audience. All the pandemic restrictions are seriously messing up the schedule. As of tonight, we can't even rehearse until further notice." "Don't watch the news then," Elizabeth said. "The numbers are higher than ever. Oh, I almost forgot. You got something in the mail. It looks like a wedding invitation, but literally no one is having big parties right now, so I have no idea what it is." I paused to answer a couple of questions. Number one, what is Amber's job? Number two, what is delaying the performance of Amber's new play? The red envelope sat propped up against the fruit bowl on the table. I picked it up. The paper felt expensive, and the address on the front was printed in perfect calligraphy. Definitely an invitation. I opened it. "So, is it for a wedding?" Elizabeth asked, eating a handful of pretzels from the bag on the coffee table. "No," I replied, reading, "it's for a party." "Who throws a party during a pandemic?" Elizabeth asked. "David Prospero," I said. "The guy who spent $1 million to go to space?" Elizabeth asked. "That guy?" "That guy," I replied. "How do you even know someone who's that big of an asshole?" Elizabeth asked. "I wouldn't say I really know him. He came to see the last play I was in before they shut down the theaters," I said. "He came backstage and we talked for a little while. He was okay, kind of full of himself." "Seems like he knows you," Elizabeth said. "Are you going to go? And if you are, can I be your plus one?" "I mean, I guess I may as well go, right?" I said. "I could network, it might help my career, but it says no plus one, sorry." Elizabeth shrugged. "Steal an extra swag bag for me," she said, "and we'll call it good." I dug my phone out of my purse and scanned the QR code on the invitation. "Damn," I said, "the list of instructions and disclaimers on this thing is unreal. Look at this." I handed Elizabeth the phone. She rolled her eyes while she scrolled through page after page. "OMG, rich people," she said. "You have to quarantine for 10 days, have 2 negative COVID tests, sign a non disclosure agreement, and agree to stay locked down on site in the Hamptons for a minimum of 10 days. Seriously, this dude sounds nuts." "It sounds pretty safe," I said, "though. If everyone has to quarantine and show they're COVID negative, my chances of getting sick out there are pretty much zero. Besides, what else am I going to do while I wait for the theaters to reopen?" Okay, pause to answer some questions. Number three, what was in the red envelope? Number four, are Amber and Elizabeth in the same socioeconomic class as David Prospero? Answer the question, then go back and highlight evidence you used to make your inference. Number five, summarize some of the safety procedures David Prospero has put in place to prevent his party guests from spreading COVID. Number six, do you think David Prospero is responsible for deciding to host his party? Explain why or why not. 10 days and 2 negative COVID tests later, a limo picked me up in front of my apartment to take me out to David Prospero's compound in the Hamptons. I hadn't known what to pack, so I just threw a few dresses and swimsuits into a bag and hoped I could restyle my outfits enough to look decent for 10 days. I had heard that Prospero's place was extravagant, but I wasn't prepared for exactly how extravagant it really was. When my limo pulled into the massive cobblestone driveway behind dozens of other limos, I was amazed by how massive his little place in the Hamptons actually was. The white pillars and sprawling marble steps looked more like the entrance to a museum than to somebody's home. Uniformed staff greeted me warmly and carried my bags to a private room. There was a bottle of Dom Perignon and a charcuterie board waiting for me. The closet had been filled with expensive and outlandish costumes. My assigned personal assistant, Sherry, saw my confusion and laughed. Wondering about the costumes? She asked. Mr. Prospero adores costume parties. He commissioned several costumes for each of his guests. Each costume is a replica of a 17th century carnival masquerade design. That is the theme of this experience. He likes his parties to provide an immersive experience. Wait until you see the party rooms, they do not disappoint. Wow, I said. I had no idea this was going to be such a huge event. Mr. Prospero has spared no expense, Sherry said. He knows what the pressures of the COVID-19 pandemic have created a lot of stress, and it is his goal to allow his guests to enjoy a break from that in a completely safe, disease free environment. Feel free to enjoy everything the property has to offer, and if you need or want anything, don't hesitate to text my private line. Thanks, I said, and tell David thanks as well. This is incredibly generous. Sherry smiled. Seeing his guests enjoying themselves is all the thanks he requires, she said, closing the door behind her. Pause to answer a couple of questions. Number 7. List some of the special details that Prospero has provided to make his party special. Number 8. What is a word you would use to describe David Prospero's personality based on the evidence in this section of the story? Answer the question, then go back and highlight 2 details that allowed you to make this inference. Sherry hadn't been kidding about Prospero's attention to detail. The party rooms were nothing short of amazing. The house faced east, and the entrance to the party rooms began at that end of the house. There were 7 massive rooms, all in a row, all connected. The last room ended at the west side of the house. Mr. Prospero's vision is a cohesive experience, Sherry said. The color aesthetic of the rooms creates a sense of smooth flow that doesn't jar the senses. I had no idea what any of that meant, but the rooms were unbelievably luxurious. The first room was decorated entirely in a pale blue. The sofas were upholstered in expensive blue silk. The thick, soft carpets were imported from India. They were all hand-woven based on Mr. Prospero's designs, Shelley informed me. The windows were made from pale blue glass. It was magical, like floating through a watercolor painting. The next room was purple, the next was green, then orange, then white, then violet. Each one showed the same attention to detail as the first. Every item, every window pane, matched exactly. It really was magical. The final room was the most opulent. Everything in the room was draped in rich black velvet. The windows were a deep, vibrant red. The centerpiece of the room was an enormous black clock. It had a large pendulum that swung back and forth, ticking loudly enough that it could be heard as far away as the blue room. Pause to answer a question. Number 9. Summarize what makes the rooms for the party so special. It was easy to lose yourself in the party. There was a lot of expensive wine. Between the alcohol and the costumes, it felt like the real world didn't even exist. By the 3rd day, the pandemic became an abstract concept that didn't relate to our current reality. Prospero banned watching the news or talking about the day's death counts, so it was easy to forget. Somewhere between the sushi bar and the hot tub, I lost all my inhibitions. The days blurred together in a haze of expensive food, costumes, and hookups. People were dying, but that was far away, outside the walls of Prospero's mansion. Everyone here was young and healthy. We didn't have to worry about getting sick. We were free to have fun, and we took full advantage of our freedom. The only thing that jarred us out of our fun was the clock. Every hour, the clock would ring out the time. Everyone would stop whatever they were doing, silently listening to the clock chime out the time. When the chiming stopped, everyone would look solemnly at one another for a moment, then resume whatever drunken debauchery they had paused before the clock rang out the time. Something about the sound of the clock reminded us that there was still a world outside Prospero's house, and that world was still in the middle of a public health crisis. But another glass of champagne and a game of high stakes poker would make us forget, at least until the next hour. The costumes were sparkly, and the people in them were beautiful. That was all that mattered. All right, pause to answer some questions. Number 10. Describe what happens when the clock chimes the hour. Number 11. What do you think will be important about the clock as the story goes on? On the fifth day, I noticed someone unfamiliar in the crowd. He caught my attention because of his costume. Everyone else was wearing something brightly colored and shiny, but this guy was dressed in a plain black robe. The hood was pulled up so I couldn't see his face, but I knew I'd never seen him before. Everyone else was laughing, dancing, and drinking, but this guy just stood at the edge of the crowd watching. I decided to go introduce myself. "Hey," I said, "I haven't noticed you before. When did you get here?" He didn't answer my questions. He didn't even look at me. Finally, he said one word: Prospero. "Try the blue room," I said uneasily. The man just nodded. Pause to answer some questions. Number 12. Explain what is unusual about the man in the black cloak. Number 13. What do you think the man in the black cloak is doing at the party? It wasn't long before I knew he'd found him. I could hear Prospero yelling at the man. "How did you get in here?" Prospero asked angrily. "This is a private party. No outside guests. I'm going to have you removed from the property. If you're lucky, I won't press charges. You're trespassing." The man didn't even tense a muscle. He just shrugged his bony shoulders and slowly headed west into the purple room. Prospero, angry, followed him. "I said you needed to leave," Prospero said. "Once again, this is a private party. You don't have an invitation. You are trespassing." The party came to a screeching halt as everyone stopped to watch. Prospero fumbled for his cell phone. "I need security in the purple room now," Prospero hissed into the phone. "You have allowed an unauthorized guest onto the property, and he needs to be removed." Prospero paused as the security officer on the other end of the line replied. "You obviously weren't watching the perimeter," Prospero said, "because I am looking at him right now. Don't try to tell me there's no footage of him entering." Pause to answer a couple questions. Number 14. What seems strange about the man in the black cloak? Answer the question, then go back and highlight 2 pieces of evidence from this section that support your answer. Number 15. What do you predict will happen between Prospero and the man in the black cloak? By this point, the man had made it through to the white room and was headed into the violet one. Prospero ran after him. "Stop!" Prospero shouted. "Security is on their way. I intend to press charges." The man, still silent, still moving unhurriedly west through the rooms. Prospero followed. "I don't think you understand how serious this is about to get for you," Prospero said to the man. "Do you know who I am? I can ruin you." They had reached the final room. The red windows cast a bloody wash of color over the man and Prospero. The clock began its hourly chime. The strange man smiled and reached out his hand, patting Prospero on the cheek. Prospero coughed. He kept on coughing until he couldn't breathe. He lay on the floor of the black room, choking and gasping, until finally he was still. The man reached out and stopped the pendulum of the clock. He walked back through the rooms: violet, white, orange, green, purple, blue. In each room, coughs erupted from the guests as he passed. By the time he closed the heavy door behind him, the only sound was a symphony of ragged coughs, as one by one the guests fell to the floor. I was one of them. All right, last question, number 16. What can you infer about the man in the black cloak by the end of the story? All All right, let's go ahead and look at this writing prompt. Follow the steps below to write a paragraph on the following topic. Here's your topic. Explain the identity of the mysterious man in the black cloak. And I'll give you a hint. He doesn't necessarily have to be a person. He may represent an idea. So keep that in mind as you answer. So write one sentence that explains the identity of the man in the black cloak. Write a second sentence that gives one piece of text evidence that proves your explanation of his identity is correct. Write a third sentence that explains why the evidence you chose proves your analysis is correct. Write a fourth sentence that gives another piece of text evidence that proves your explanation of his identity is correct. Write a fifth sentence that explains why the evidence you chose proves your analysis is correct.